Well, it's a new year, and that means it's a new... I'll be honest, I was late making the 2024 version. I was out for some time because we actually have something planned really cool for this year. So be sure to stay on the channel if you want to hear a little bit more. But right now, we're gonna see where the collection stands out for 2025. Watches that left the collection, watches that stayed in the collection, and new acquisitions from 2024. And also, we're gonna go over what I have my eyes on for possibly this year, or I don't know, a few years down the line. Let's check it out. The Citizen Eco Drive Diver. So this is the watch that kind of kicked it off for me in this whole world of dive watches, and it happened to be this specific Eco Drive. I have it here. I'm not sure on the last video, but if I ever change it out or swap it out for a different strap, but I have it here on this orange strap. I'm a sucker for anything orange that's on the dial, especially on that second hand. So I don't know, it's a nice summer watch. Orange is not for everyone, but I think it looks really great on this guy. Next in the line, we have the Blue Lagoon Turtle from Seiko. This was my first Seiko that I bought. I mentioned this before. It was between an SKX or a turtle case, and I went with the turtle case. And I'm kind of glad I went with it because it's a little bit more robust. But I did own, you know, that's not true that nothing left the collection. I did own a couple SKXs, the original 007 and 009, and I regret selling those guys very early on. I acquired it shortly after owning this piece right here. So, but I still wear this guy. It's on the Uncle Seiko Z199 bracelet here. And honestly, it wears super great on the wrist here. It is a little bit top heavy just because, you know, these links are a bit lighter, but I think it looks great. Next is another Seiko diver, specifically the SBDC 053, which at the time when it was released, it was kind of like the 62 Mas reissue that wasn't the reissue, and then it got, you know, updated later down the line. But this one's still a prized piece in the collection because it was a gift from my in-laws, and it's forever appreciated. It's a handsome piece, especially on this strap. Again, I forgot what strap this was paired on in the last day of the collection video, but this one's paired with a sailcloth strap. I believe it's like a hybrid sailcloth strap from Artem, and I think it's a perfect pairing with this specific piece. All right, next we have is the Solar TUNA. This one's a really great watch. I really want a Seiko TUNA. I know it's not for everyone, but ever since I laid my eyes on it, it really grew on me, much like a Seiko Monster that we're gonna see next. But this one is the Save the Ocean series, and I think it's a really nice variation of a Solar TUNA that's out there. It has like this wave pattern on the dial here, and it's paired up on this 22mm NATO strap from Fossil, as you can see. And that brings us to the Seiko Monster, and this one is a really great piece. It is a beater piece, and I did purchase it like this, well worn by the previous user, and it's just a great watch. It's exactly what you think of when I think of a Seiko Monster in the first gen series. So I think that weathered look really, you know, it fits this specific style. It's very brutalistic. The bezel action is great. I mean, some people might call it cheap. I call it a clicky bezel. And I have it paired here on the Artem strap as well, another sailcloth hybrid strap from them, with this spring-loaded RM style clasp here. Now moving down the line of dive watches, we have the VOSTOK AMPHIBIA section. There's only 3, but this one is my favorite case, the 090 case. Specifically in this dial configuration. It's almost like a Panerai radio mirror type-esque dial with the 12369 hour markers. And this one, this case is not for everyone. It's a tonneau style case and the original bezel that came with this, unfortunately, it was a super high polish bezel, which didn't match the case, that like bead blasted case. So what I did, and I mentioned this in the last video, is I popped off the bezel and used the back of a sponge to, you know, give it some brushing finish on it. And the result came out like this, and I think it looks perfect. Now we have another VOSTOK here. This is the 120 case, which for a lot of people, this is the particular VOSTOK they think of when they think of a VOSTOK AMPHIBIA. And unfortunately, this one doesn't get as much wrist time just because, yeah, you see that second hand, it just stopped working. But it is a cool little piece to show people, especially if they're just getting into watches. And paired with this silicone strap from Archer. It's pretty cool. And lastly, we have this green dial 110 case from VOSTOK Amphibia in this lagoon green dial, which I think is really cool. And the weird thing is I got a lot of compliments on this particular watch. I don't know why people seem to be drawn to it, but if you pay attention to that bezel, you see how like high polish it is, or that chromed out bezel. Yeah, that's how that was on this guy. Not a great look, but in this particular case, it's okay because the case is also that high polish look to it. 3 VOSTOKs right here. I don't think I'll be getting any more VOSTOKs. I heard it's kind of like a disease. Like once you start collecting VOSTOKs, you just keep on acquiring more somehow. But I'm glad it kind of stopped here. All right, back to Seiko. Now we have a Seiko 5 diver, but the Roaring Blazers edition. And this particular one has this, you know, this Uno style bezel to it. And actually we're gonna come back to this watch later on because it's in relation to a new watch that I bought last year. So this one's pretty cool because it has some details that, you know, set it apart from your average Seiko 5. And that colorful dial, that colorful bezel at first, I wasn't sure if I was really into it, but after a while, it's a fun watch to wear. As you can see, it has kind of like a few scuffs on it just because I've been enjoying this piece. But it's a great watch. Wears great on the wrist. The legendary CASIO DURO Marlin edition. I remember before, I'm not sure if this is the case now because I haven't checked the market. There was a moment when Casio was thinking about getting rid of the CASIO DURO, and I don't think they ever should because it's the perfect entryway into a dive watch. For many, this is a great size for me. It's a little bit big, it's a little bit large, but that's just me because I like wearing smaller cases anyways. Great piece. I'm not going to mention Bill Gates because for some reason people don't really like whenever I mention the word Bill Gates, but I just mentioned it, so I guess people are just not going to like it. The SQUALE CORSO ITALIANO. This one is in collaboration with What a Watch Is, and it was a gift from them too in exchange for a review, of course. I love this watch. It looks almost like it gives Blancpain vibes, but to me, it kind of stands on its own, and it's just a cool piece to wear. I have it on this gray sailcloth strap from Artem again, and on the wrist. It's the perfect fit, I feel. And also the bezel action on this, silky smooth, very tactile, and a great click. And lastly, the last watch in the diver category of my collection is another Seiko 5 in this cream colorway dial and this vintage NATO strap from C&S Bands. Great place, by the way. You should check them out for any of your band needs, especially for the prices. This is not a sponsored video, by the way, so I actually do really love C&S Bands. If I need to have a dive bezel at my disposal, this is probably the one I'm gonna go to, especially if I'm getting my hands dirty for something. So that's it for the diver category. Let's move on to three-hander watch category. So first things first, we have a Flieger watch here. And the reason why this is the first in line, because this is the watch this was my first serious purchase. And I know in my last video I said that this was my first Swiss watch, and what I mean by that, it's, you know, my first Swiss watch movement watch, I guess you could say. But I'm aware that it's a German watch, hence the name Flieger. But yeah, this was my first serious watch into this whole world here. And this one actually came shortly after ownership of the Citizen Eco Drive that we saw earlier in the video. But I love this thing. This is the LEIPZIG, and really cool piece. I picked this up in, what city was it? Hamburg, and it was a great time trying to hunt this down. At the time, they didn't have a big web presence. You had to go on their German side, but even then, you couldn't really order anything through there. So you really have to go through some of the 80s, which at the time was all in Germany, or most of them was in Germany. So this is a great memento to that time when I was studying over there. Next up is the mighty Casio Beside BEM SL100 Trio that we have here. Although we are missing one more variant, which is the blue variant. Honestly, I have no issues with that. I don't really like the blue on that thing, but it would be cool to have it to complete the whole setup here. But as you can see, they're not running anymore. I changed the battery twice, actually. This thing consumes a lot of energy, but they're great pieces. A lot of people have been asking me from not only the 2023 State of the Collection video, but the actual video featuring these, which I think was my second video ever on this channel, if they're for sale. They're not. This is part of my personal collection, and if you haven't watched that video already, you should, because it was a pretty wacky time picking up those pieces. And I don't think that Casio is going to be making these lines of, or not these lines, but this particular model anymore from the Beside line. Now this is the part of the video where I feel like a lot of people are going to be leaving because we have our first Rolex on the table. And whenever someone mentions Rolex, for some reason people tend to get Rolex fatigue and they run away, but this is part of my collection, and here we have Rolex OP reference 166000. I love this watch. It was my first Rolex. It was between this or a 36mm Explorer reference 14270, but I opted for this one. One, because it was cheaper, and two, I wanted something a little bit different, so I went with the silver dial. I know it's on Explorer, it's a very different watch, but I love this thing. I got married in this watch, and it's never gonna leave the collection. So that's a perfect segue into the modern iteration, well, not modern, but the most recent iteration of the 36mm Explorer, and the turquoise edition, the Rolex OP reference 126000. This one is sized for my wife's wrist because she's the one that's mostly wearing this. Although at one point we did lend this to my brother-in-law when we were getting married to wear it with this suit, and he looked really great in it. The only upside to this watch, aside from the updated caliber and updated bracelet, is I wish, you know, it did have this half link adjustment here when your wrist swells up after eating something really salty. But overall, it stays in the watch box, and whenever my wife is feeling fancy, she'll put this guy on. I should do one of these where I do like a side-by-side. It's a great couples watch. Old and new, silver and turquoise. And last but not least, in the time-only category, a perfect segue from the Tiffany OP is the Tiffany SEIJI, or rather the Chrono Tokyo SEIJI, inspired by the Tiffany blue color. Actually, sorry, it's not inspired by the Tiffany blue color. It just happens to be released during the time when the Tiffany blue color craze was going crazy on watches. And this was actually acquired before the Tiffany OP. And if you haven't heard the story of that already, that Tiffany OP we were able to acquire shortly after acquiring a Pepsi a week afterwards, which is absolutely insane, or a week or 2 weeks or something, I forget. But it was absolutely insane to get that phone call for two very desirable watches, you know, within 2 months. But my wife did wear this watch in there, and she did inquire for the Tiffany OP. So, you know, maybe they looked at her as like a collector. She likes Tiffany blue watches. Maybe that helped out. But my wife does genuinely really like that color, and she looks great in that on her wrist. But this one is a really great watch from Chrono Tokyo. There was a lot of controversy with this. If you know, you know. Super sweet. This one, I don't wear this. I think it looks a little too feminine on the white strap, but it is a great look, great combo. But I really love this case shape and dial design from Hajime Asaoka. This is a little bit of a foreshadow for what I've picked up later last year. I mean, if you know, you know, because you've probably seen my videos, you know what watch I'm talking about. Chronographs. Now, I don't have many in the collection, so this is only going to be a very short section talk. But this one, let's start it off. This is the Seiko 7826. Amazing watch. I love this thing. If you know the story, I picked this up for less than $100 at the time, and it's such a cool piece from the 80s. And, you know, considering that it's the first analog quartz chronograph, it's pretty cool just knowing that. And it works perfectly, probably like it did when the owner first got it. And let me just look at that. Runs like a champ. And this watch I do frequently wear. And last in the chronograph series, we have the WMT 6239 homage watch in this really funky dial, you know, paper cutout arts and crafts type of look to it. Pretty cool piece. There was a point where when I purchased this, and then maybe a few months later down the line, I kind of thought about it. I'm like, I kind of regret buying this watch. I mean, it is sold out. But I don't know why. I just FOMO'd into purchasing this watch. But I think the reason why I bought it too is kind of like to fill that void in a vintage Rolex 6239 that this is kind of based off of. And of course, it's not going to be the same. But nonetheless, a great watch. Very fun. GMTs. And I know a lot of people don't know much about this brand. I owe it all to them because they were actually the first sponsors of this channel, which is really cool. I think I had close to 1,000 or a little bit over 1,000 subscribers at the time. And it was cool to collaborate with them on reviewing this piece for them. But this one's particularly special because it does say the inception of my channel, year, and channel name, Clicky Bezel 2022. And it's already 2025. God, it's been like 3 years already. That's insane. Time flies. The Seiko 5 GMT. I remember when this first came out, it was amazing. I mean, they released the NH34 movements, and it seemed like there were tons of Microbrands using these movements, and there were just a ton of GMTs out in the market just last year, which is great because the GMT is my favorite complication. Some would say it's the most useless complication, but to me, I think it's pretty cool that you can use it while traveling. Even though this one is not a traveler GMT, it's a caller GMT, but either way, it's a cool function to have. And especially coming from a time when getting into watches, you couldn't really get a cheap GMT. So this one's really cool. It comes in an orange dial, which seems to be a crowd favorite. It is my favorite and super fun watch. And last but not least, we have the mighty Rolex GMT Pep-C reference 126710 BLRO. My grail watch that I was somehow able to get within 1 month. I still can't believe it. It's such a cool fantasy to think that you can even obtain a Rolex sport watch at retail. I know I've heard lately that it's a little bit easier now to get a few of these sports watches, but the Pep-C and of course the Daytona still remain the hardest to get. So I'm forever grateful for the 80 that sold it to me. Well, this and along with the Tiffany OP, which I still can't believe they would sell me 2 highly sought after watches at the time, still at this time, within 2 months. So kudos to them. Kudos to them. I haven't picked up anything else. They have never offered me a Daytona at this moment. So for good reason too, for good reason. But yeah, this one is a very special piece to me. Like I've always lusted this ever since its release. And especially on the configured Jubilee bracelet, I think that's the way it should be for this particular reference. But you know, it's been with me everywhere on my trips to Japan and anywhere where I can wear it safely. I'm learning to embrace the scratches, learning to live with the watch. Will I ever sell this thing? I don't know. I considered it multiple times, but we'll get to that later in the video. I learned from my lesson from the last time I did this State of the Collection video that it was a very physically demanding video to make. This is day 2. Okay, now the next category of watches. I guess this one has its own kind of unique take on watches. These are, I guess you can call, the quirky watches of the group. The CIGA design Blue Planet. This one's in the titanium version, and it was gifted in exchange for a review with CIGA design. And it's a very interesting watch. I don't wear it out too often, but I can see the appeal and why people would really love this watch. I know a lot of YouTube reviewers, what they usually do is they get the watch in and then they kind of sell it off or they give it away. I keep my watches, depending on the occasion, maybe I need to wear something a little quirky like the Blue Planet that we have here. I think they have a new version of the Blue Planet. I'm not sure what the difference is. I also have it here against the gilded version, which again was used in a sponsored video, both of which are very interesting pieces. And to round out the CIGA design collection, we have the Series Z right here. Yeah, I think we all know what this watch kind of looks like. RM vibes, and all of which are on these silicone straps, which are pretty nice actually. But yeah, this one doesn't really get that much wrist time. It's not really my style of watch that I usually wear, but it was fun to wear during the time using this watch for a review. I can see the appeal. Some people really like this design. It is very striking. Seiko School Time watch. A watch that I did a full review on and dubbed it as the true baby Grand Seiko. For good reason. It kind of does look like a Grand Seiko in terms of the the grammar of design. I know it doesn't have the facets as it is, but It's a really quick watch because one, it's actually made for children, hence the name School Time. And from what I hear, they actually do have a new version of the School Time, which was released a few years ago. But I mean, these guys, the vintage ones are the way to go. And another quirky watch, which was featured in the last State of the Collection video, is this BRAUN. And unfortunately, this one doesn't get any wrist time at all. For some reason, the battery tends to get depleted quite a bit. But yeah, a really quirky piece. It is the original AW50 from the 80s, I believe. And, you know, it's seen better days, especially on the dial if you get in close on that. But, I mean, original BRAUN from Germany, pretty cool. Now that I think about it, I think it would have made sense to group this with the chronograph section, but I don't wear this one anymore just because it's out of commission. I need a new battery for it. But never got around to doing that for years now. And I've worn it so many times during college. It actually came with me during my trip to Europe for a few months over there, backpacking throughout Europe. It was a fun time. Till this day, it's a great watch. It looks apart. And that watch is actually the perfect segue to this TIMEX Q quartz. And I remember when the first one came out, I think it was a Pepsi version, it was sold out everywhere. It was during the time of the pandemic, and it was a really handsome watch, and TIMEX was really heading into the right direction. This one, I believe I saw it on Slick Deals for pretty killer deals, so I had to pick one up. It's not the Pepsi version, it's a little bit different, but it's a navy and orange dial here, which is pretty cool. And it looks like it just ran out of battery. Now, I don't know why I put this in the quirk category, but I guess it's a quirky watch because it's very divided. People either like it or they don't. And for the longest time, I didn't expect this. My video on trying to acquire a fake GMT and also my trip to Japan video were my top two videos for the longest time. And just recently, this video about the Alpinist is actually my #1 video, which is insane because I was not expecting that's the Alpinist. I myself enjoy the Alpinist, but for some reason I haven't really found this on my wrist a lot this year. I might have to change that for this year. But I have it here paired up on this like Ranger green Artem strap here with this spring-loaded clasp. Pretty cool look, matches that dial perfectly. Moving on to the digitals. We'll kick this off with the digital watch that really made me fall in love with watches. CASIO calculator watch. It has seen better days. It has not depleted its battery, which is great in typical Casio fashion. But I also have it here against this white version here. I call it the Oreo because it kind of reminds me of an Oreo. It's not particularly stark white. So yeah, two great watches. And unfortunately, I don't really wear it that much anymore. This one I was wearing a lot in college, and I was actually doing calculations on this thing, which is kind of ridiculous if you think about it. It's more of like a novelty. But nonetheless, two great and essential watches from Casio. And speaking of essentials, I of course have a classic DW5600 here. This one does occasionally get on my wrists from time to time. If I know I'm doing something really labor intensive, this is the one that is probably gonna be strapped on my wrist. I guess I'm not wearing it enough because it is in pretty good condition here. And last of the classic Casio digital watches is this guy right here. Also known as the Casio Royale. Great watch, it's pretty cool, and it's still running after all these years. I never had to change out the battery ever since I got one. If some people are just starting to get into watches or they've just been wearing smartwatches for a while, this is probably the perfect transition before they get into, you know, in a more analog style watch. And we have the Casio ARNIE here. It looks like it's almost out of battery because you can't really see it on the digital display here, but very similar to the Seiko ARNIE. This one was actually worn, well, not this particular one, but this model was worn by Arnold Schwarzenegger himself. And I don't really wear it too much. I bought this used and it's seen better days. The crystal's all scratched up here. But I think it's such a cool thing to get. I got it used for like, I don't know, $10 or something like that. And lastly, another watch that is out of commission, but is a really cool piece. I could probably get started again, is this TIMEX digital watch. I think I got this from Walmart at the time. It has this stretchy bracelet, which is nice, Spidell style. Yeah, it's probably not going to see the light of day anymore, but not really worth selling either. So it's staying in the collection. Now these watches are going to have its own category, the plastic watch category, and specifically the plastic watches that everyone loved and don't really like anymore. But to be honest, I did fall out of love with these watches, but I owe everything about this channel to these watches right here. These are the watches that started up the Clicky Bezel channel. It was my very first video, and first set of videos really featured these watches. And yeah, I owe it all to these guys right here. Oh, also, I forgot to mention this, but I do also have a Mission to Neptune right here. And this one was actually bought from the store at retail price. And yeah, they basically did me a favor and sell me the first generation one that they had around. And it's pretty cool. I kind of just keep it here as a keepsake, part of the collection, and a reminder of how crazy those days were. I'm kind of glad the hype is dying down, but I'm a little sad too, because that's when a lot of people got into watches. And out and about, I actually see a lot of people wearing these watches out too. I think maybe it's their first watch, maybe it's their first watch outside of owning an Apple Watch, which is pretty cool. Maybe down the line they'll pick up a real Speedmaster. Who knows? But yeah, these watches right here tell the origin story of the Clicky Bezel channel. And still on that same topic of plastic watches, we do have the original Swatch System 51 watch here. And this one truly is out of commission. Like, it doesn't work anymore. I'll do this. It doesn't run at all. At all. Kind of sad, because it hasn't been that long since I've owned it. I think it was 2015, 2016, around there when it first released and I got my hands on this. But nonetheless, cool watch. But I know for a lot of people, it's a very disposable watch, which I can see that. But there it is, the first gen. And last but not least, to round out the whole plastic watch collection, we of course have the Blancpain 50 Fathom Scuba from Swatch. Super fun watch. It was fun in the moment to actually camp out and be the first person in line there at the San Francisco Swatch store. And it was a fun time. It was a fun time. Even though it was grueling, I think it was 16 hours of waiting in line, it was worth it, especially when you have good people around you. All right, now we get into the fun stuff. The watches that I picked up in 2024. And to be honest, it was either gifted or purchased personally. And I have to say, it was a lot more watches than I was expecting this year. This one was earlier in the year on my trip to Japan. And of course, it's the Seiko Spirit Chronograph in this icy blue dial. This one is the reference SBTR027. I mean, just look at it, how it's just sitting there in the light. It looks really expensive, but in Japan, you can pick this up for less than $100. I picked this up in Bic Camera, and there are a ton of these things over there. Sometimes I'll forget I have this because I kind of put it in my watch box where it's kind of hidden. But whenever I see this thing, I have to put it on. And next we have this beautiful Citizen Bullhead challenge timer from 1970. This one, of course, was picked up in Japan at Fire Kids, and what can I say? It is beautiful. It's pristine. It has all the right dimensions. It's vintage and it's properly sized. Now, like I said before, I'm not sure exactly what the previous owner did with this watch, but when I first acquired it, there was no marks whatsoever on the case. And this particular model on the octagonal cases, it's easy to see if it's been polished or not, because you won't really see really defined chamfered edges here. But this one is absolutely stunning. And when you run the chronograph, buttery smooth. On the wrist, it's even better. Check that out. It's great. And last but not least, from my travels from Japan, is this Kuoe Oldsmith 90-002. This one, I knew I had to get it just because we were in Kyoto. What better way to commemorate your time there than with the watch, right? Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to go to the actual retail store. They were actually a month out from opening, but I was able to acquire this one in their office. So either way, I got the same level of service, just not in their new fancy and beautiful store that they have now. But this one is the 35mm version, and I know they have a larger 38mm version, but if you know me, I'm a fan of smaller cases. And on the wrist, I mean, especially with my black shirt here, it's a great everyday watch. And you know, I know a lot of people tend to go for the 38mm, but the 35mm I think is more truer to the founder's design aesthetic. Actually, this is a really cool shot here. This is the KURONO Tokyo Reiwa. it's an amazing watch. I had a really fun time making a video for this one. It has like a Tron legacy vibes with the blue and the neons and all. It's a really cool video if you haven't checked it out. I'm really proud of that one. But this one is very similar. Actually, it is similar. It's the same case and everything to my wife's watch here. Only difference is the dial. Now, what really got me with this one is online, it doesn't really look that this dark and mysterious, but in person, it's a great shade of blue against that black dial. Very mysterious. That's the reason why I kind of got some Tron vibes from that. Almost like those Tron discs, if you're familiar with that movie. But the way that it plays with the light is great. The way that the hands play against that the black dial is great. And overall, just a really fantastic watch to wear. Now, this watch is really cool, not only because it's a cool watch, but the way I acquired it. If you haven't watched it already, I did a video with Eric Wind. He DM'd me one day out of the blue after watching my shopping watches in Japan video, and he decided that he wanted to do a video together. So we did. And not only that, but he also gifted me this Vulcan Cricket, which is unbelievable. And if you know Eric Wind, like, he's a prolific collector of watches, but in particular, he really loves Vulcan Crickets. So what better way to, you know, remember that moment than this watch, which is still, to this day, I'm still in awe that I was able to work with Eric Wind on that one. Really cool. Also stay tuned because there's also going to be another video with Eric Wind coming out pretty soon. But if you aren't familiar with Vulcan Crickets, they're basically alarm watches, and you can set them off like this. I'll give you a little sound bite. Yeah. That'll definitely get you up in the morning. It's still going. And speaking of Eric Wind, this watch was actually co-designed by Eric Wind, and this company based out of Los Angeles known as the Northwatch Collections. And from what I remember, the founder of this brand actually is a prolific watch collector himself, and he basically wanted to create homages so that he can wear these ones and not his expensive, who knows, $250,000 plus vintage Rolex. This one, as you know, looks very reminiscent of a vintage Rolex Daytona, but with little details on it, aside from the color, which by the way, I came to this realization that if you look at this Seiko 5 and this rally timer, as the brand of this watch would call it, they share the same colorway on the bezel here and on the dial. And that is not by coincidence. Did a little more research. This was also co-designed by Eric Wind. Makes so much more sense. This one's very similar to this WMT watch, but just with a little bit more pizzazz, especially with that green bezel and that tri-compacts color on those registers. On the wrist, wears like a vintage watch, but feels a lot more fun. And this one is actually my first watch that I actually build. This one came from Namoki Mods. It came in pieces, and I was able to put it together for a while. It took some time, but I was able to put it together successfully. I didn't break anything. The hands are still straight. It was a great time. I probably won't do it again. Maybe I'll do it again if I catch the bug to, you know, to mod a watch or to build a watch again, but maybe not for a while. This was pretty fun though. This one is of course a GMT using the NH34 caliber from Seiko. And it's funny because it doesn't look anything, I mean, it looks similar, but if you look at the case thickness, it's a really thick boy on the wrist, even with a leather, or even with the rubber strap. But it was quite the experience. It was pretty fun. So yeah, thank you Namoki Mods for my very first watch mod. And lastly, my last acquisition and also my last video of 2024 is of course the Kuoe Kyoto Sombrero. Very quirky watch. Well, not particularly the design, but the name, Sombrero. I already made my thoughts on that. If you haven't watched it already, please be sure to watch it. It's a fun one. When I had hints that Kuoe was going to make a dive watch, I was a little afraid just because they're more known for, you know, more elegant pieces or field watch designs like the Old Smith over here. But I'm kind of glad that they went for this super compressor style case. It's not so seen in the Microbrand watch world, so it's good to see it here. And it functions really well too. really easy to unscrew and screw back down. And it comes with several options for bracelets. I opted in for the Jubilee bracelet, of course. It's, you know, my preferred bracelet style. And on the wrist, it wears amazing. But I think the real selling point for me on this watch is that dial. It has this linen texture to it where it's very subtle, but then in the right lighting, you can kind of clearly see its linen texture. And it's a salmon dial, of course, but it leans more copperish in this light, I would say. All in all, a really beautiful piece from Kuoe, and that basically wraps up my collection from 2024 going into 2025. So the last question is, what's next? Like, what other watches do I have lined up down the line? And to be honest, I don't really know. I mean, I do have an idea, but it's probably not going to be acquired this year. A few watches that I have in mind, 3 watches, and they're all vintage. All thanks to Eric Wind. He kind of got me looking at a lot more vintage watches. One of which is, of course, a Rolex GMT 1675 reference. I'm just casually looking. I'm just seeing what's out there on what I like and what I'm looking for in a 1675. It would be really cool to have it paired up against a modern version here. Maybe selling this for 1675, but the thing is, I have all these stories tied to this watch, so I don't know. I can't really see myself getting rid of this modern GMT right here. But it's a cool thought. Eventually I'll own one, but I don't think it will be this year. Next, I've been seeing a lot of Rolex dates out there. The reference 1500. This one from Graham Patina. The dials that he comes across are just amazing. And the prices are pretty great too. An Omega Speedmaster Mark II. And I'm talking about the ones from the 70s. Now the Mark IIs didn't really get much love, but I don't know, something about them, it's really growing on me, the way how funky it is. And it's almost like a Seiko Monster. It kind of takes some time for it to really grow on you. But the vintage ones are amazing. I've seen a few modern ones, but they're just a little too refined for my taste. But yeah, the prices are kind of crazy low on those too for what those are. That's basically it. This is my collection here and where it stands in the beginning of the year of 2025. Yeah, we're almost at 50 watches here. It's 47 watches. But yeah, we'll see where the collection goes for this year. Now be sure to stay subscribed if you haven't already. We have a super big announcement for the channel that's coming probably in a few months. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this collection video. I am exhausted. I'm Chris. This channel is Cookie Bezel, and we'll see you on the next one.